be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution...
This is a very polite crowd for the fact that it is a Friday evening. How many of you are teachers? Raise your hand. Yes, so give it up for the last day of school. Yes. That sounded like the first day of school. Give it up for the last day of school. Yes, like you mean it. Like you turned your grades in or will soon, sometime. Like you went into your colleague's classroom and found all the supplies that had been missing all year and that it turns out that they had. Who knew? My name is Eve Ewing. I am very, very glad to be here. As Linda mentioned, I don't usually say former Chicago Public Schools teacher because it's kind of like a lifelong obsession / identity. So I am a teacher, I am an educator, and I'm currently getting my doctorate at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. But yay, it's all right. I mean, compared to teaching middle school and CPS, it's like really easy. I don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. It's not a big deal. But I'm very, very glad to be back because I am a lifelong Chicagoan. And of all Chicagoans, some of my absolute favorite people are teachers and educators. So I'm excited that we're here tonight because we're going to get to really hear some wonderful stories, those close-up stories that educators often just go home and tell to their families and friends, but that we don't always get to hear in public and that are very different from the stories of education that we sometimes see on TV and the movies. So that's going to be fantastic. I'm going to start by giving you a little housekeeping and telling you how things will work tonight. First of all, everybody should have gotten a drink ticket, which you should use generously for yourself, and pizza. And so onto those things, this is already like a wonderful night because you're drinking and you have pizza, so that's great. If you're not, you should be. Secondly, basically tonight we're going to have what we're calling a mini slam. The point here is not to be competitive, but as I said, to share those stories and to celebrate the safe space that we've created here with a group of educators and people that care about education. So we have a feature judge and a series of other judges that we just heard the fantastic biographies of. And I'm also going to be sharing a story. One of our feature judges will be sharing a story. And we've really just designed the evening to help you enjoy those things. So please listen closely, celebrate, give positive feedback as you hear it. If you want to tweet, we highly encourage that. And afterwards, at the end, we're going to have more time to just talk to each other and listen to music. So it's going to be a good time. Catalyst Chicago. Are y'all Catalyst _ Hashtag Catalyst25. Good question. Catalyst, is there an underscore? Can one of y'all tell me or no? No. Okay, just Catalyst Chicago. I am Eve Ewing. If you choose to follow me, most of my tweets are about racism and donuts. Either the racism I've experienced or the donuts I've eaten or I'm looking forward to eating. So that's pretty much a spoiler alert, so you know what to expect from that. So all the stories tonight will receive a score of 1 to 10 points in 3 categories. The first one is writing. This music stand gets 0 points. The second one is delivery. And the third is the impact, which is worth double the points. And impact is like the super secret surprise category. So I will not be reading the judges' impact scores. Instead, we will find them out at the end of the evening, and so it can kind of keep you in suspense. But we really encourage you to listen closely and get loud, turn it up to show how you feel at the end. Before we get started, in a second I'm going to bring up Marilyn Rames, who's going to be our featured judge and share one of her stories. But if it's okay with you all, I'm going to read a poem first. Is that okay? Okay, great. This poem, y'all, this is just like struggle bus with the music stand. Thank you. My friend here, what's your name? Anthony is just like gathering up papers and being my new best friend. This poem is really sad, so I'll say that up front so you know what to expect. And it was published in a journal called Bird's Thumb, and that was exciting for me because a lot of topics in poetry that people explore, like love and their family histories and things like that, don't often include the stories of educators, because as we know, once again, the stories of educators are really excluded in the public sphere sometimes. So this is a story about school closings, and I'm going to read it now. Can I get the music cut? Oh, so I cannot. That's great. I'll work with it. This poem is called Requiem for Fifth Period and the Things That Went On Then, and it is on the internet if you want to find it. Sing, muse of the science teacher. eyeing warily the ungraded projects leaning against the back wall, beneath the board on which she has hastily drawn a pinnate leaf and a palmate leaf. She moves from her desk to the window to watch the flag football game and the man in an electric wheelchair leaving the senior housing complex, and an old Lincoln Town car parked near the pothole that damaged her axle this morning, and the White Castle bag caught in a gust moving across the basketball court as if possessed, and Mr. Harris blowing his whistle. Tell us of Javante Stevens in the 4th grade, who is now tapping Mr. Harris on the shoulder to say that Miss Kaiser will be sending over 3 kids who did not bring in their field trip money and cannot go to the aquarium, and is that okay? Sing of Javante's new glasses, their black frames and golden hinges that glint in the sun, and his new haircut with 2 notched arrows shorn at his temple, and his new socks, which are hidden, but which feel best of all, and which were the last of the new things he received from his auntie this weekend when she visited from Detroit and slept on the couch and declared that Javante's improved grades meant that he should have many new things. Sing of the rough-hewn piece of wood Javante uses to keep the heavy door ajar while he walks outside. Call out the noise it makes against the painted cement when he kicks it back in. Sing the song Javante hums as he carries his message back up the stairs, stepping in tune, nodding in tune, to Bo as she calls after him, warning him not to slip on the newly mopped floor. Sing of Bo, moving the mop from the top of the ramp to the bottom, stepping gingerly past the place where the carpet's unruly corner bends upward, guiding the wheels of the bucket to remain upright despite the heavy dent in the one. Speak of the pungent, alkaline smell of the water and the slap when the fibers of the mop hit the floor, and the squeal of the bathroom door, and the shuddering sob, audible in the moment that disc 2 of The Broker by John Grisham skips in Bo's CD player, and her pause in the threshold of the bathroom, and her retreat from the girls' room to the boys' room, which she will clean first. Tell of Nikayla Smith in the girls' bathroom, breathing in sharply when the door closes, pushing the stall open gently, moving to the sink, splashing water on her face and wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her blue Oxford uniform shirt. Sing of her heavy ascent to the counselor's office, for today is the day Nikayla will unbutton her collar, and the button below, and the button below, and tug aside the bleached white tank top to show the small round burns that pepper her breast. Praise Ms. Hightower, the counselor, who does not gasp or cry out at the moment of revelation. She only holds one brown hand in her own, and with her left hand lifts the phone and dials Mrs. Marshall, though she is only just across the hall. Sing muse of Mrs. Marshall, who cannot answer the phone right now. The desk is unattended, and she leans against the other side of the oaken door, the principal side, where a sign reads, "Children are my business," and a doll-like painted woman smiles broadly, surrounded by the faces of earnest people. She is resting against the wood as her forearms strain with the weight of all the papers, colored like oatmeal or dust, each with a label at the top. The first label says Stevens, Javante, and below that, Kaiser, and below that, the 8 digits of his identification number. Tell of how she collates them by classroom and then alphabetically, though each letter is the same, though each letter has the same news. Tell muse of the siren that called their joy sparse and their love vacant. Tell of the wind that scattered them. Thank you. All right. I appreciate y'all. This is the first time. Actually, this is not the first time I've read poetry with a rock band behind me. This is the first time I read poetry with a rock band behind me that is outside, that I cannot see. So I feel like we have an invisible connection. I'm going to bring up our next reader, Marilyn Rames, who is also our special guest judge. Give it up for Marilyn. And she is going to show us how it's done with the first story of tonight. So storytellers, just a reminder, when you come up, please introduce yourselves and then kick it off. Thank you, Marilyn.
Tell what music is coming from. Is it inside or outside? Thank you. Okay, thank you. I must tell you that I don't dress up like this on the last day of school. Today was our graduation day. So I have another week of school left. Yay for me. Yeah, this is. Thank you very much. So I can't see. Okay, thank you very much. This story is called Haunting Words to Inspire Every Teacher. And I wrote this. This was actually the very first education blog I wrote. And I tweaked it for tonight. And I hope you enjoy the story. Back in the day when I had known what was really required to be a good teacher, back when I was a grad student and expected education theory to equal education practice, back when I believed that better class management was a matter of finding the right behavior chart or incentive program, I stumbled upon a conversation in the teacher's lounge that would change my life. I had recently fled, yes, I said it, fled an elementary school on the west side of Chicago. My year of student teaching had begun in a staff meeting in which the principal told us that she hired us because we were physically attractive and that she loved the green stuff, gesturing money with her fingertips, and thus would have no problem firing any of us to save her job. She frequently used the school's PA system to enforce her tyranny. Once she announced basketball tryouts and bluntly told students, "Don't sign up if you can't play. I like to win." This is a true story. I was assigned to a mentor teacher who passed out worksheets all day and once responded to an insult from a student by saying, "You talking about your mama." Some days I felt more like a bouncer than a pre-service teacher because I had to break up fights and shout at the top of my lungs, "Everybody, would you please be quiet?" I knew that if I were to gain any positive teaching tools, I'd have to go to another school. So after 6 months, I fled. The split was so messy that the teacher and the administration refused to let me say goodbye to my own students. I ended up finishing my training at a neighborhood school on a different side of town. That's when I stumbled in on the career-altering conversation in the teacher's lounge. The chatter was animated. A group of teachers were reminiscing about their classroom horror stories. John dashed out of the classroom, threatened to jump out of the window again. Angel knocked over bookshelves in a fit of rage. And in my desire to fit in and one up the last tale, I began to share about my unbelievable dysfunction at my old school. Even though I hadn't yet earned my teaching certificate, I felt I had earned some stripes. I was persevering to educate this lost generation of adolescent youth despite the pervasive insanity within the urban public school system. I was the heroine, fearless and unafraid. It happened to them were the 4 words that shut me and the other teachers up. What? It happened to them, not you. You tell the stories like it's some kind of entertainment, but it happened to them, the kids. They're the ones who 30 years from now will remember these stories with tears in their eyes. It was the middle school social studies teacher. He was a demure white man in his late 30s who wore cardigans, much like Mr. Rogers. Until then, he had kept silent, even as each story gave rise to a higher level of ridiculousness. This teacher went on to explain that he, too, used to complain and feel like a victim until another teacher rebuked him with those words. Now he felt compelled to pass that wisdom on to me. It happened to them. This truth has haunted me for the past 12 years I've been teaching. I am only glad that I got set straight early in my teaching career. Some teachers never seem to get it. You know this when their debates about education are centered on what's in their best interest and not in what's in the student's best interest. And no one entity, not CPS, not the teachers union, not one charter school provider, no political party, is immune to the temptation of this selfishness. Neither am I. Disrespectful students drive me nuts, but they're the ones that's hurting and will suffer a lifetime of hurt if they are still angry. It happened to them. The lack of parent involvement that turns me into an overworked teacher, mama, daddy, babysitter, social worker. But really, it happened to them. I cried in 2008 when my principal fired me for standing up for what was right. I looked him in the eye and I told him, these tears, they're not for my job because most days you make me want to quit. These tears are for the low-income, underprivileged African-American students in Inglewood who just lost a dedicated, high-quality teacher. I'm not the protagonist. I'm not the hero. As a teacher, I'm a supporting actor. Everything that happens in a school happens to them. I have 3 children, 2 of whom attend the school where I work, and I am all the more aware that whatever it is in a school, good or bad, is happening to them. This truth forces me to think deeply about what I believe and gives me the courage to advocate for it. I strive to be like that social studies teacher. He dared to change the narrative, even in the teacher's lounge. He may not have changed the world, but he changed me. Perhaps there's a discouraged teacher in this room who could use some changing too. After all, you are happening to them.
Thank you, Marilyn. Give it up for Marilyn. Yes. So, as teachers, we like to model. We like to model the behavior that we want to see, right? And I did some really poor modeling before Marilyn went up because Marilyn she was like our show us how it's done person. And one thing that I failed to model was how you ought to respond when you hear something really fantastic. So let's try to practice that now. This is like a call and response. This is an interactive type situation. Y'all are here like in the round as in the days of Shakespeare's Globe, and so we're relying on each other to build community. So when you hear something you agree with, what are you going to do? Yes, I heard amen. I heard I heard a lot. I heard some snaps. That's good. If you hear something sad, what are you going to do? Oh, y'all going to make some sad faces and then just be quiet. That's what I learned. Okay, so please feel free to react. Please feel free to share. Also keep in mind if you make a new friend that y'all going to have a lot of time to talk afterwards. But first, we're going to kick it off with our first story that is competing for the evening, okay? So just a reminder, judges, give a little wave. This is the judges panel here. Remember, the judges will be grading in 3 categories. And at the end, I'm going to read the first 2. The third one will be a surprise. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Abdel Shakur. He is a writer and teacher at Evanston Township High School. Give it up.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my name's Abdel Shakur. This is my first year at Evanston Township High School. I taught for, 7 years in Chicago Public Schools, 4 years at Chicago High School for the Arts, and then some other years at ACT Charter School when it was still a school. Thank you. Wow. Okay. So the piece I'm going to read today is about, because we're all about leadership today. Can you guys hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. So we're about leadership today. That's the theme. And I really kind of struggled with this for a second because I had a piece about a student and then I had to think about how is this about leadership? And for me, this has to do with the way that art leads, the way that art we create leads us, ourselves and others. So the funny thing about this piece is like it's me, and then there's a poem that the student, and you're gonna hear both voices. So I'm gonna try and portray both voices to the best of my ability. Okay. All right. And the piece is called "The Hood." It's by Aaron Rushing. The name of the piece that I am performing is Innocence and Revision. I've been thinking a lot about innocence. It's kind of becoming an obsession for me lately. And it's like when you turn on the news, I just think of innocence, just with some of this crazy stuff that's going on and how it kind of affects us in the way that we think about the world. So this is Innocence and Revision, and it's the life of Aaron Rushing. Starts with the poem, the beginning of a poem. The poem is called "The Hood" by Aaron Rushing, May 14th, 2013. Small green grass, smelly dirty trash, big tall red apartments, vicious Rottweilers barking, drug dealers or slangers, blackmail with the bangers, everybody wants to sell, black males killing themselves. Aaron Rushing was a freshman then. Dark skin and cottony dreads that mostly covered his sleepy, steady eyes and sometimes smile. A self-taught virtuoso on the guitar with a quiet rock star way. But that afternoon, I was waiting for him in the stairwell, collecting thoughts, trying to figure out what to say to him about this poem, this worrisome poem he'd written for class. Everybody got a set, rep is set till death, talking about they took your son, well, they can't take what you don't let. Aaron's poem seemed to be a little too worldly, a little too knowing. It celebrated the brotherhood, the strength, the revelry, the belonging, the malice of the streets. All well, Big Mo, Amor de Ray, Latin Kings, gang greeting, social packs, go to Kivo, get some packs, flipping birds, counting stacks, buddy gotta put in work, gotta represent his set, through the colors on his shirt. Never ever lack, gotta always watch your back, stay alert and keep a strap. GDK, BDK, cracking trays all day. Earlier in the year, Aaron wrote an essay about being racially profiled in Walgreens. They thought I was a ticking crime bomb, Aaron wrote. After recounting what happened, he explained that since he was a young black male from a high crime neighborhood, it was only natural for him to be viewed as a suspect. Rage and fear trembled beneath the lines of his story, but he told it in a way that left the possibility of innocence for those who judged him guilty. Dr. King would have been proud of the young man, and that's why his poem was so troubling. I stopped him in the stairwell and told him that the piece was dope, but the rhymes needed tightening, and that more importantly, I wondered what it was actually trying to say. It seemed to want to celebrate the lives of the people it talked about. It seemed to care about them. But it spoke little of the consequences they inflicted on themselves and the people around them. I don't remember Aaron saying much. I can see him there nodding respectfully, arms slack at his sides. I wanted to ask him more about his life, about his poem, but I didn't. I could tell Aaron wasn't going to say much. He never really did. I asked him if he understood what I was saying. He said yes. Then he went to get his guitar and headed to class. They're on the outside looking in, I guess. To them, he's just so stupid. If his brothers wrote this poem, this is how they say they do it. Some weeks later, I was grading the final drafts for a portfolio project. I sighed at Aaron's portfolio. You know, looking on turning in, and you look and you're like, oh, man, God. Just one poem of the required 5. Despite being a solid B student, this was going to wreck his grade. Then I read his revision. He ain't grow up in the hood grew up inside of him. It's kind of fun, but after a while, you just get tired, and tired. I was stunned. No longer was it a celebration of street life. The poem soberly described the psychological snares that trapped a young man in the streets. I guess he's married to the streets. He was born a human beast, spitting words over beats. He was born to evade, jumping hurdles, making leaps. Born to the bottom, he aspired to have it all, but moved too fast, and there's a greater chance to fall. Blind to his dreams, he could do nothing but stall. Now, the speaker knows his audience carries the why question to his poem, his experience, along with his preset answers that are already made by bias. But this piece doesn't need the audience to bring why. This piece doesn't need the audience to bring why because the question already lives at the heart of this poem. Why does the boy get wrapped up in a life that ends in such misery? Why him? The speaker slips in some clues. Born a human beast, born to evade, born on the bottom, a boy with no choice, no agency, no chance. Talking about they took your son, well, they can't take what you don't let. The hood was his first friend, the first friend he met. Say he's gonna cap somebody when it's you, don't get upset. Bullets flying, mama's crying, and it's still his brother dying. The speaker interrupts the parents' grief to chide them about letting the tragedy happen, but doesn't articulate what the parent did or did not do to cause this. The speaker doesn't say. Maybe the speaker doesn't know. Aaron's essay was about misperceived guilt, but his poem was about the inherent guilt of the child, the family. Sad as this is, it really shouldn't be that surprising. It's hard to convince a child that being denied a chance at innocence is not the same as being born guilty. It's hard to convince a child that being denied a chance at innocence is not the same as being born guilty. Someone once told me that innocence is lost when you choose not to question the truth in front of you. Innocence is not simply about purity or youth or ignorance or white kittens. Innocence flourishes when we choose to question the world and ourselves more closely and act accordingly. Ironically, Aaron's revision about the lost innocence of a child ended up revealing his. He realized, probably even before I said anything, that he had not wholly examined his lived experience. So, he went back and allowed us to delve into the sorrowful fraternity of men lost and abandoned, marked for containment and death. In the words of his brothers, in the words of the dead, he just wrote what he heard. Like in this poem he just read. Don't make judgments, don't assume, if you ain't got nothing to prove, that you can fill the same one's shoes. Art leads us to questions that lead us to more questions that lead us to ourselves, our innocence. Our children are questioned, judged, and condemned so often that questioning becomes external, fruitless, and sometimes a damaging process. Why ask questions of yourself when the answers are all the same? Guilty, guilty, guilty. Our children need to know innocence can exist in any present moment, as long as we open ourselves to being led by our questions. They don't stop nightsticks or hollow points, but our questions can unshackle our souls from a world that fears us, a world we fear. That's an awesome power. In Aaron's case, this wasn't enough to save him. On May 19th, 2014, just about a year after he turned in his poem, he was shot and killed in an alley on the south side of Chicago. I don't know what happened the Sunday afternoon he was killed, but I do know his commitment to school and the guitar he loved, the guitar he was so brilliant at, had wavered. He transferred from the Chicago High School for the Arts and was getting closer to the streets. When this sort of thing happens, we talk about how the young person should have known better, which, of course, is a judgment on their intelligence and moral character, and perhaps innocence. But for me, Aaron's poem shows he did know better. I just wonder if he felt better. Did his heart know that he had alternatives? Did his heart know that his destiny wasn't written in tombstone? Did he know how courageously he was? Know how courageously he was. Aaron Rushton was a tremendous writer, artist, and student. Led with his art, his wit. Here.
Thank you, Abdel. I'm going to give the judges a second to tally their scores, and in the meantime, let's have a moment of silence for all the students that we've lost. If you've lost a student or someone you know has, anytime. Thank you. We do this so that we can do something better for them. Judges. Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. Am I supposed to be able to see that? I'm sorry, y'all. I'm not as young as I look. Oh, okay, great. So Marilyn, you got me. Okay, so first I need the points for writing. All right, I have an 8. Oh, this is all the judges are collaborating on a score? Oh, just Marilyn. Okay, great. It's cool. We practice. Can I have 8? Keep going down the line for just your writing points. Thank you. Okay. Yes, go ahead. Okay. 8. Okay, thank you very much. Give it up one more time for Abdel. Don't forget about the scores. Just listen to the story. Okay, next up we have Caroline Gonzalez. She teaches senior English at John Hancock College Prep High School on the Southwest Side, and she just finished her 3rd year of teaching. Give it up.
Coming to you loud and clear. Like to bring up one.
So last year, I had the honor of teaching an incredibly fierce young woman named Brandessa. Well, as her teacher, by nature, I found myself in a position to model and exemplify leadership. It was Brandessa who taught me what it really means to lead. And so this is Brandessa's story of leadership. "Why are you moving so slow, PR?" the sergeant screamed in my face as the sweat was dripping down from it. His spit combined with my sweat, and it moved down my eyelids and slowly reached my lips. The sweat and spit sat on my upper lip, giving me the ability to smell it, imagining the disgusting taste. The sun blazed in my face after Sergeant walked away. I was blinded, yet I kept my plank position on the ground. There is no stopping during physical training. You either keep going, or you might as well quit and leave. I've always viewed the Marines as people who are looked up to. They are people who are not afraid of a challenge. They are people who risk their own lives to save others. That's who I want to be. My mother, on the other hand, doesn't agree. She constantly reminds me that in order to be a Marine, I need to be a man. She states that the job of a Marine doesn't fit under the category woman, that a woman doesn't meet the standards of dealing with aggression and facing everyday death. I didn't bother arguing with her. She doubts me, and that's all it took to break me down and realize how horrifying it is to not have the support of my own mother. I wanted to prove her wrong. In my junior year, I decided that I wanted to join the United States Marine Corps after high school. I thought deeply and weighed out the benefits. A huge envelope came in the mail, inside containing a book of information on what the Marines expect from a person and what their goals are. Their goals pulled me in. After reading, I received a call from a staff sergeant. I went for an interview, met some more sergeants and a couple of police, people getting ready to leave for boot camp. As soon as the interview was over, Gunnery Sergeant Smalls handed me my PT uniform because I was starting the next day. For the next year, I trained in certain exercises such as push-ups and pull-ups. I would try to do more than I could to show my motivation for getting what I want. As the gunnery sergeant began to notice my motivation, he chose to stick to me like gum. Gunny Smalls, gunnery sergeant's nickname, was constantly on my back, shouting at me from the top of his lungs. Yet, at the end of the day, he would always congratulate me on my progress. The more I practiced, the better I got. That is, until I reached the running challenge. When that began, I was falling behind, running way back, trying to catch up with the rest of the guys. I'd turn and look back just to notice that neither destination point was close enough to run back to or to keep running towards. Staff Sergeant Theory then ran back, when I assume he noticed I was far behind. He mentioned me. No one gets left behind. Now come on! After hearing those words, I jumped back to running position. This work is now part of my daily life and is a routine I intend to keep. Back in the beginning of August, I was losing my mind. I had constant images and flashbacks of my mother's words. I was ready to give up. I stopped going to PT because I was sick of hearing her remarks about me going and being a tomboy. She would say I was wasting my time. I soon began to believe that myself. 2 weeks into August, I avoided total communication with the sergeants at the recruiting station and the police. They would call me each and every day, text me, whatever they could, but I'd ignore it. I was feeling weak and sad by then. My mother noticed it, but she never suggested going back. A couple days later, I was doing my stretches in front of my house, preparing for a run. As my back was facing the street, someone walked up to me and tapped my shoulder. I turned back, and it was Gunny Smalls. He sat down and began to talk to me about why I stopped going. Our talk resulted in tears, me explaining to him how no one supported me in what I wanted to do. He gripped my shoulders and told me to look up at him, so I did. He said I was in a big missing part to the group. If I wanted to keep going, he would do whatever is possible to get me back where I was again. I felt special. He was my motivation. As soon as my mother found out I was going back again, she went on complaining about the same thing over and over. I ignored her comments and remembered what Gunny Small said. I was motivated once again. I realized I really didn't need anyone to support me, especially with major putdowns, which in my case came from my mother. I was motivated by the ones I wanted to be like. My mother still doubts me, but I tell her that whatever she says against my choice in joining the Marines doesn't matter because I'm still going to PT until my boot camp date is in my hands. I simply know that I want to be the better fighting woman, a United States Marine.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Gosh, the image of looking forward and your destination is far and looking back and your destination is far is going to stick with me for a very long time. Judges, let's hear the writing score. Scorza. You're pontificating, you're pondering, consulting, thinking your judge-like thoughts.
If it wasn't for you, I'd be on my own.
Y'all ready? We're still friends, but we have 3 more storytellers, so judges, you have a certain amount of capital with me that will wane over time. Y'all ready? Okay. Okay, let's hear those writing scores. Everybody starts out with an A. It's yours to lose, judges. Okay, across the board. And delivery. Delivery scores. Oh, yours is just a 7. Yeah, sorry. I thought I heard 7s plural. My bad. I was testing you. Okay, writing scores. I have a 7 and 7. 8. Thank you. And delivery? Okay. Okay. Okay, and don't forget, everybody has the impact scores, which they're holding for later. Forget about the scores. If you like the story, give it up one more time. Next up, we have our penultimate reader of the evening. Irma Olmedo is a retired professor from the University of Illinois Chicago. She has published extensively on bilingualism, education, immigration, academic research journals, and is now using her research background and lived experience to write short stories focused on the Puerto Rican migration and diaspora. Give it up for Irma.
Hi, it's great to be here. When I walked in the door, they said, "Oh, you're one of the performers." And I thought, no, I'm not here to perform. But then I thought, if we're teachers, we're always performing. And if we're a teacher of teachers, we're performing even more. So, but I'm going to read this pretty straight. And it is based on a true experience. And it's called Cristina and Carlos. Boy, is this an exciting conference, I said to the young man standing in line ahead of me to pick up some guisado, tortillas, and frijoles. I can't believe the incredible range of workshops here and the creative ideas that these teachers are presenting. I need to invite some of these teachers to my teacher ed classes to share what they've been able to do in their own classrooms in spite of poor leadership from administrators or cynical colleagues. My students sure can use these examples as they prepare to become teachers themselves. The young man agreed. Yeah, it really is a great conference. This is my first time, and I'm blown away by what I've seen and heard. I especially like the sessions on teaching history, he added, because they select topics we rarely get into in our regular classes, but they still find ways to link them up with the same themes, like ones dealing with bullying of gay kids and connections to the civil rights movement. I've never made those connections, but I could see it might be a good way to get kids interested in amendments to the Constitution and a whole bunch of other issues. We were at the end of the line of the delicious local food and could smell the salsas throughout the room. I hope we can find a table, I said. This place is pretty crowded. As we proceeded to walk around the gym, almost all the cafeteria tables were full. Only one spot appeared to be available at a large table. Profesora, the young man said, why don't you sit here and I'll see if I can bring over a chair. Thanks, I said, surprised that he addressed me as Profesora. We hadn't even exchanged names as we focused on filling our plates with the meat, the tortillas, the salsa, and the guacamole. I sat down at the table. Everyone seemed to know each other, all chatting at the same time, the buzzing noise drowning out the specifics of what people were saying. I must be getting old, I thought to myself. It was hard to hear what even the people sitting next to me were saying. Oh well, I'm just here to eat now, I thought. Of course, it would be fun if some of my former students were here and came over to introduce themselves. I'd love to hear of their teaching and how they're doing. The young man who had been standing in front of me online didn't return. He probably found a spot at another table or met up with some friends. This place sure is crowded. And if he has friends and colleagues here, I'm sure he'd prefer to sit with them than some women he doesn't even know. As I was finishing my tacos, he showed up again, dragging over a chair. I found some friends at another table, he said. May I join you now for dessert? Sure, be my guest, I replied. Now that I was able to talk to him face to face, I had a strange feeling that he looked somewhat familiar. After teaching for almost 20 years at the university, that wasn't an unusual experience. Even in such a large city like Chicago, I occasionally encountered former students. I always apologized for not remembering names, but they understood that I had many more names to remember than they did. Would you rather have the flan or the churros, Profesora? The young man asked. I can go back and get some for us. Flan, of course, I volunteered. I always ate more than I should at these events, and it would be easier to control the calories in the flan than in the churros. So, are you a teacher in CPS? I asked when he returned. What do you teach? Yes, I am. I teach high school history. I really like my school, and I like the students. You seem awfully young to be teaching high school. Do some of your students sometimes confuse you with their peers? Yeah, that happens sometimes. But most of the upperclassmen know me already. Word gets around quickly about who I am. How do you like teaching history? Was that always a favorite subject of yours? Oh, I like it now, but it hadn't been one of my favorites. In my high school experience, it was one of the boring classes. Too much memorizing names and dates and isolated facts. I couldn't put it all together, and I always wondered what it had to do with me. I'm glad those days are over. So I assume you're able to teach it differently to your students? Are they as bored as you were, or have you found that you're able to make it more interesting to them? Well, I had a great mentor teacher whom the students love. She was my cooperating teacher during my student teaching, and she changed my whole way of seeing history. If it hadn't been for her, I might be teaching the same way that I was taught. Did you attend college in Chicago or somewhere else? I asked. Actually, I graduated from UIC several years ago, he said. I also had some good history teachers there. I think that's why I decided to teach the subject. Oh, you're a UIC graduate. I teach in the Teacher Ed program there. Attending these conferences keeps me up to date on what's happening in the schools. Yes, I know you teach at UIC. In fact, you were one of my professors. I especially liked your class on immigration. Even though my family was undocumented, I learned a lot of things I didn't know from your class. Several undocumented students organized a Dreamers fundraising event one semester. It felt good to be able to come out rather than continue hiding our undocumented status. It made us feel freer to be ourselves. So you were my student, really? I thought you looked a little familiar, but I'm afraid that sometimes I have a hard time remembering former students' names. I'm sorry about that. Well, you may not remember me because you knew me as Cristina. He paused for a while as if trying to decide how to continue. I'm no longer Cristina. I'm Carlos now. Maybe that's why I look a little familiar. I'm not totally done with my transition. Oh, I said, trying not to appear too shocked. We had dealt with LBGT issues in our ed courses, but mainly to raise the awareness level of our students. This, however, was my first time personally encountering the trans world. I never felt like Cristina, Carlos explained. And when I finally graduated and realized that I could be who I really was, I decided to pursue that route. Coming out as undocumented gave me the courage to take this step. This was indeed a new experience for me, but I tried to continue the conversation in a matter-of-fact way. And are you getting support in your school with your colleagues? What about your students? That must be quite a challenge. Actually, it's been easier than I thought it would be, Carlos said. As I said, it's a great school, and I love my students. My problems have more to do with missed homework and cell phones in class than sexual identity. And what about your family? How have they responded? Well, my mom has come around. My dad still hasn't gotten there, but he's trying. It's a big road for him to cross. I have 3 older brothers, and I was always his little girl. All of a sudden, we were interrupted by the bell and the announcement that the keynote speaker was about to start. I gave Carlos a big abrazo, and I wished him well. Great to see you, and continue to enjoy your teaching. Please stay in touch. I have the same UIC email address. And don't give up on your dad. Parents generally come around. I still had 1,000 questions for Carlos. In over 20 years of teaching, this was my first experience with a transgender student and a Latino at that, or so I thought. But I could be wrong. I hope that his colleagues continue to provide a safe space where he can be himself, and that the administration of his school continues to support him to become an excellent teacher. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Y'all really showed out. I'm ready to go home and write some things. Judges, how are you doing? We have Josh Kaufman on deck, our final reader of the evening, but first, I'm ready for your scores. They're coming along. This is a timed test. You have 1 more minute. Yeah, after this, we're all going to kick it and act like it's Friday night and like you're tired teachers that worked very hard all day. And we will also hear our feature. Anything else that I should say from my producer? Thank you. All right, judges, your time is up. Put down your Scantrons. All right, for writing, we have an 8. 8. 8. 8. Awesome. And for delivery, 8. 8. 8. Oh my gosh, it was all 8. Fantastic. Don't forget to keep your super secret impact scores for the end. And keep your applause going for our last reader of the evening, Josh Kaufman. Josh is the executive director of Teach Plus. Come on up, Josh.
Thank you. So I was debating 2 different stories that I was thinking of telling today, and one was really, really dark about all of the terrible things that happen in our school systems. But then I was thinking, it is the last day of school, and it's Friday, and it's summer, and so I'm not going with that story. But I am going to tell a story about leadership, sort of a story of 2 schools. A good leader can make a school, and a bad leader can break a school. And I know because I've worked for both. My first school in New York City, where I taught for 6 years, had what could only generously be called bad leadership. We had a principal who was incredibly picky about absolutely nothing, and he would shout and yell at teachers for the smallest of things. I remember waiting outside his office one day, and the technical theater arts teacher was in there, and he was being yelled at for like 30 minutes because he had hung the curtains like slightly the wrong way in the theater. And I mean, okay, maybe it was a mistake, but really, 30 minutes of yelling at someone, you would think as a principal you should know how to encourage people. That was really nothing compared to one of the other administrators who had engineered a cheating scandal on the New York State Regents exam that was so bad that ultimately, at the end of the year, New York State changed the way all exams were graded across the state. So that was the bad. And after 6 years of that, I decided I'd had enough of that. And I'd had enough of that high-paid urban teaching work. So what? No, seriously. So I took a position as a volunteer teacher in Namibia, which, if you don't know where it is, don't feel bad, because for half of us, it wasn't a country when we were going to school. But Namibia is in southern Africa. It's just up and to the left of South Africa. And so I was teaching, I got a job teaching in Namibia, and I was teaching at a school called Canisianum, which is sort of an oxymoron in U.S. terms. It was a government-funded Catholic school, which I know doesn't exist here, but it made sense for that country because of a whole bunch of historical reasons that I won't go into because they're actually rather boring. But it sort of functioned like a charter school. They sort of had to partly answer to the government, partly answer to the Catholic Church. There was just a lot more praying than in a regular charter school. And they had dormitories, which wasn't common for all high schools there, but for some of them. Anyway, that was a place where I met a leader that I could believe in. And the principal there was a man named Werner Kalippi. And Mr. Kalippi was a short native Namibian with a very large pot belly and these sort of like furrowed brows that were salt and pepper and these piercing eyes. And he had this very sort of, he was very easy to laugh, but he was even easier to bark. And I experienced that bark the very first day of school. We were at our very first staff meeting, and there was a small school, so there may be 13 or 14 teachers sitting in the staff room, and the principal comes in and he says, "This is not like those other schools you are at. At our school, you must always come to work on time. At our school, you must work hard. At our school, the learners must learn. And if you do not do that, oh, you are finished." So he literally threatened to fire every teacher on the first day of school. And I mean, I was a UFT member in New York City, and then I came here and I did think, what in the world did I get myself into? I actually learned later on, however, that there was some good reason for him to take that hard stance. A friend of mine at a different school told a story about a teacher who had left the school and was hanging out on the coast with his girlfriend for 3 months, just chilling. And then he eventually called the school, not to apologize, not to beg forgiveness, but to tell them where his new address was so they could send his checks. So maybe this principal had some rationale. But I tangled with him a couple of times. The first one was actually dealing with an issue that was really prevalent in Southern Africa at the time, which was the spread of HIV. At that time in Namibia, 1 out of every 5 people in the country, 1 out of every 5 adults, was infected with HIV. So this was a huge issue. And I wanted to deal with it. I mean, my idealistic little, teacher self, like, I'm going to go teach these kids safe sex. And so I did want to talk to the principal about it beforehand because it was a Catholic school and who knew what sort of trouble I'd get in. And so I talked to the principal and I say, this is what I want to do. Are you okay with this? And he sort of furrows his brow and he says, oh yes, this is a very big problem. It's a very big problem. HIV is terrible. And the learners, they must learn about it when they're in university. And I was like, these kids are 17 years old. Like, they're not going to wait. But so I had to be a little bit of a leader myself and figure out a way around the principal on this one. And I looked in the book room because I was teaching English. I'm an English teacher. And I found in the back of the book room, sort of under all the other books, there was one young adult novel from South Africa where there was a girl that got pregnant. And, like, not great in the story, but it was perfect for me because I could teach this book, and through the book, we could open up the conversation about HIV. It was a terrible book, but it didn't really matter because it sort of achieved the purpose. And I never told the principal about it. I figured that was one where, forgiveness was better than permission. He was a pretty fierce guy, as you might imagine. I saw several other examples. One day I walked into this principal's office, and there were 4 students in a row, and they were all just sitting like that, like standing like this. And I didn't know what they had done, but clearly this was the punishment that he was making them do. And I talked to him for 5 minutes, and they didn't move, and I walked away, and I don't know how long they stood there like that. But, one other time, there was one of the classes, I think it was the 11th grade class, was making a lot of noise at study hall. And so the principal said, all right, fine, if you're going to make noise, if you won't follow the rules, I'm going to kick you out of the dorms for a month. So the kids had to go into the community and find people who would let them sleep in their houses for a month until he would let them back in. So, up till now, I've told you a bunch of stories about this principal, and you may be thinking, why do you think he's a good leader? He sounds crazy. But then came Herbertha. Herbertha was one of my students. She was a 9th grader, very sweet girl, very smart, very, very quiet. She was sort of very tall and thin. And she came from a really poor family. It was so poor, she wasn't able to stay in the dorms. She had to walk 6 miles each way to come to school. And that's not a joke. That was just what her life was every day. And her family was in such desperate financial straits that they weren't sure if they were going to be able to afford the very minimal school fees for the next school year. And so I learned about this, and we were thinking about it, and I found a scholarship that she was eligible for. So I worked on a Friday afternoon. I was working on the scholarship application, and I got it done. And at about 4:30, I walked over to the principal's office to ask him to sign the scholarship. That was all I needed to do. Now, one thing about schools in Namibia is that on a Friday afternoon, they are just like schools in the United States. The kids want to go, the teachers want to go to a bar, and it's very much just like a school in the States. But I figured this would be no big deal, 2-second signature and we're done. So I bring it into the principal's office and I tell him what's going on and, how it will affect this one learner. And he furrows his eyebrows like he normally did, and he listened. And once he finally understood what the consequences were, his eyebrows unfurrowed and his eyes softened, and he read over the application again, and he picked it up and he tore it into pieces. And he said, "This is not good enough. You must write it again. I saw that sentence was not good." It's 4:30. I go back to the teacher's, room. I sit down. I write it again. I bring it back to him. Now it's 5:30. He reads it again. And he says, "No, you crossed out those words. You must not cross out any word on an application." which was the way they did it there. So then I went back again and I wrote the whole thing again. And I came back and it was 6:30 and he read it over and he looked at it and he nodded his head and he said, "This is good, thank you." And he signed his name on it and we both walked out of the school and it was about 7 o'clock and the sun was setting and it was this giant fiery sun and it lit up the baobab trees and it washed the white walls of the school in this beautiful golden color. And I realized that in that moment I had also found gold because I was working for a leader who put his students' interests in front of his own and his teachers, and they were absolutely first in the school. And that's what leadership really is to me. Thank you.
So much, Josh. That was fantastic. Give it one more time for all 5 of our amazing competitors tonight, and for yourselves for being a wonderful audience. In a second, I'm going to, judges, this is for you. I'm going to talk about some other stuff so that you have things to do. Don't forget that Catalyst's 25th anniversary events are happening all year. There's some free copies of the magazine up front. It is really the only place where you can get the kind of in-depth reporting and details on the real story of Chicago Public Schools and schools across the city. Also, when we are done, there's going to be more pizza in the back, and I hope you all want to meet each other and say hi. And we have a very, very, very special guest. So in a sec, I'm going to take Josh's score. You're going to have to stop. In a second, we're going to have a very special guest. While the judges are tabulating the final scores, we're going to hear from Ray Salazar. You may know him. Yes, give it up. He is the champion of the first Story Slam. And he also blogs over at a blog called The White Rhino. It is truly fantastic. I read all the time. I highly recommend it. But first, let's hear Josh's scores. Points for writing. 8. I love those teacher voices. 8. 7. And for delivery. 9. 10. 9. Okay. Wow, thank you. Forget about the scores. If you like the story, give it up one more time for Josh. And for all of our readers, judges, while Ray is talking, I'm going to come get your super secret impact score so we can tally the final scores of the evening and give out a prize, okay? So be ready because I'm coming for you. In the meantime, Ray Salazar, everybody.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Eve. Thank you. Can we give it up to Catalyst first? For amplifying teacher voice. This is the 3rd Classroom Story Slam. I've been at all 3. There's another one in October. I'll be at that one too. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for teachers to tell their stories. I also want to give it up to Ronnie, who is a phenomenal photographer. And if you check the website, you'll see some really cool pictures. So today's the last day of school, right? And some teacher at school decided that we should have water balloons with a bunch of teenagers. So we're all like dodging the water balloons today outside. And I had to run home and put on a nice shirt and, comb my hair again. Because I'm like, Bonnie's going to be taking pictures. I gotta look a little decent. So I'm very happy that Bonnie's here. The story that I'm telling today is, hold on. I had a whole beginning in the car. And now it's gone. Okay. So one of the most rewarding experiences as a writing teacher is standing back and watching my students make their own successful writing decisions. And it's wonderful to see stories and essays that kind of start in the beginning of the year and kind of develop over the year come to fruition at the end. So instead of sharing one of my pieces of writing today, I wanted to share a story by a student that I had this year. And I wish that I could have been as cool as Carlos Hernandez when I was in high school. Carlos is a humble, absolute gentleman. He gets good grades. He washes dishes at an Asian restaurant part-time. And he dresses sharp as hell. And we have had lots of conversation about clothes and just about good things in life. And one day he's going to be a phenomenal business person and he's going to do great things in this world. But the interactions this year and all of our conversations reminded me that when it comes to leadership, we usually think that a leader has to be this grand revolutionary or this bold, revolutionary voice. And I think what Carlos helped me remember this year is that sometimes being a leader is simply being ourselves and believing in ourselves. And if we do that, we can be a leader to other people so that they also believe in themselves and then fulfill who they are as people. So this is Carlos's essay. Hearing the machine as it sews a piece of fabric is like hearing my mother singing. It's a song that I memorize as I keep hearing it. The garments I put together are a final representation of the idea I had in my head, with the exception that now I can wear it. When I put on a dress shirt and my blazer, I have to look sharp. My shirt and blazer feel almost as if they were giving me a hug. The pants drape down to exactly the line of my ankle. My black shoes represent a funeral feel, as if they were death's feet, and I had just killed fashion from head to toe, especially with my tapered haircut, my hair swiftly combed to the right. My passion for fashion grows every time my heart beats. I love looking good and examining different garments. I loved fashion since the 4th grade. I remember when I got my first pair of Jordan basketball shoes. My first instinct was to match them with my shirt. I didn't like the way they looked with my jeans because they covered the Jumpman logo. I wanted people to see the brand of my shoes. After that, it mattered how I looked. I never liked my mom dressing me. I felt like if I was her dress-up doll. Besides, she dressed me so simple. She forced me into wearing my grandma's knitted sweaters, the kind that itch all over the body like if I had ants crawling on me. Despite my own passion for fashion, I figured that I didn't have anyone to communicate with. Everything I had to say was bottled up inside of me. My ideas are going nowhere, I tell myself. When I tried to express myself with peers, it did not catch their attention. It was like I was talking Chinese to them. Most of the time I felt like talking to myself. This was the way I thought it would be most comforting. I found it funny, but sometimes I deluded and misled my mind into thinking that it wasn't important. I was totally amiss. It mattered because my passion made me who I am today, and lying to myself would be a stupidity. I would lose the value of life and just fall into the identity hole that everyone seems to fall into in high school. I kept the value of what gratifies me. When I found out that my family was not accepting who I was, it just pushed me to go beyond my own expectations. Growing up in a family where viewpoints and assumptions are made quickly wasn't easy to live with, especially since I was expected to be a man like past generations. I challenged this when I took interest in my grandma's sewing. This caused a conflict because I dress with a different style and a slimmer fit than most of my family, who wears oversized clothes and conserves a close-minded fashion sense. This led some of my paternalistic family to believe I was less of a man than others only because of my interest in sewing and the way I dressed. No matter what, I tried not to break psychologically and emotionally, but it wasn't working. During my freshman year, the words fag and maricon just circled around my head. Even if my uncles and cousins were playing, their words still pierced me. Having my mother, father, and grandmother stand up for me was significant. Their support was like a big sewing machine piecing me together. At some point, I felt like a pair of denim jeans that has been distressed over the wear and tear and finally rips once it's had enough. I had the support from my mother, father, and grandmother. Therefore, they helped me stitch myself back up. Over time, I learned how to hide the seams by covering them with the happiness and pride that I was missing. I knew that my parents were supportive of my fashion, as they are of my academics, since they always brag about my good grades. Surprisingly, at a party my parents forced me to go to after my 17th birthday, I didn't care what people thought of me anymore, especially my uncles and cousins. As I ironed my dress pants and shirt, my mom told me that I was making the right decision by going and facing what was giving me a hard time. As I walked in there with my white shirt, purple tie, and slim navy blue pants, I already felt the eyeballs of people just staring at me. It was logical, since I was the only man without cowboy boots, jeans, a shirt with animals on it, and a sombrero. It first started with my aunts and girl cousins, as they told me that I looked like an actor from TV. They also wished that more men would dress like me. finally, my cousins told me that I look good and asked me questions about what stores I shopped at. As I made my way towards my uncles, I stretched my hand and gave them a firm handshake. They said that every time they saw me now, I looked more grown up and even handsome. I responded by saying, "So I'm not less of a man after all." And they replied, "No, Carlos, you're not. You are a man who is going to be more successful than us." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ray. That was awesome. I feel good about life. Clap your hands if you feel good about life. So I'm going to bring up Linda Linz to just say a quick farewell and thank you, and then I'm going to go ahead and read the scores, and then we have a lot of time to appreciate one another and enjoy our fellowship. Linda.
Thank you, Eve, and thank you, storytellers. I mean, what a fabulous evening. Let us all one more round. I'm actually going to make a few small requests. We really feel honored to be able to help storytellers, teachers get to new audiences. And we'd love to have you help us get to new audiences as well. So there's a big stack of postcards out there that talk about our 25th anniversary events. We'd love you to take a fistful and spread them around. Also, Cheyenne Banks, our production assistant who's been checking people in, is going to distribute an evaluation form. 1 minute max, probably 30 seconds. We'd really appreciate your filling that out. Let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, actually, I'd like you to hang on to your program as well. You probably didn't sit and read the whole thing, but there is information about events that are coming up in the fall, and we'd love to have you save the date. If you thought this was a fun night, we're going to have a really big, grand finale at the House of Blues, and we'd love to see you all there. Yeah, and that's, I think, about, oh, you know what? In one way, this could be the most important request for Catalyst anyway. We have come up with a way for all of you to become donors in a way that doesn't take too much out of your pocketbook, and we'd like you to consider joining us in that very concrete way. You can do just $5 a month, and we would appreciate it. Go to our website, and there's a little Act Now button. Click on that and take a look at it. We'd appreciate your support. And, oh, yes, I want to thank Itzy Nala, our fabulous DJ. And, of course, Eve Ewing, a fabulous MC. And now I'm going to read a list. These are the organizations, foundations that have made it possible for us to do events like this throughout the year. So here we go. The Vocal Fund, the Chicago Community Trust, the McDougall Family Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the Fry Foundation, the Polk Brothers Foundation, the McCormick Foundation, and we even have an official airline, Southwest Airlines. Woo! Is paying to fly in our special guests for our critical conversation forums. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, we all know that to share the parts of ourselves that are most vulnerable and most important to us is a really, really hard thing to do. And for any educator, oftentimes this is the most vulnerable, most important part of yourself. And so every single storyteller that shared the stage today is so important to us, and every single audience member, you participated by creating this space, creating this community to uplift and celebrate these stories. So all of you deserve a round of applause, and yes, do that. And I really hope that if you heard a story that moved you, something that resonated with you, something that resonated with your own experience, that you'll go up to that person and give them a high five and introduce yourself. So let's give a round of applause one more time to all 5 of our performers. In 5th place, we have Donovan. Give it up for Donovan. In 4th place, we have Caroline. Give it up for Caroline. In 3rd place, we have Josh. Give a round of applause for Josh. In 2nd place, we have Irma. Give it up for Irma. And give a super special round of applause to our champion for tonight, Abdel. Yes. One more time for all the readers and for yourselves. That is all we have for tonight. My name is Eve Ewing. Thank you for being here with me on a wonderful Friday evening. I hope you will eat, drink, and enjoy. Have a great weekend.
Come on, come on, I need you to sock it to me, mama. Come on, on and on. Room me, baby. Hey, good God, it make me feel so good inside.